I'm going to make a brief introduction because one of the things that we did when we were organizing this Congress was to establish criteria. And the criteria is most of the events that we go to, when it's the debate time, oh, it's too late, so we're going to send the questions in written later or via email later. And I did not want that, so we're going to start this debate with a 15-minute time so that all the questions can be answered and answered, so that we don't have to say, look, there was not enough time and all that. So just to briefly start, I'm going to say something that is for everyone, for Chris, for Ron, for everyone, which is, I'll give you an example based on what Ron was saying. Like when you arrive at Whole Foods in the United States and you're going to buy something, they give you two bags, two paper bags, one inside the other, right? Two paper bags. And I would like to understand a little bit more about the sustainability that they talk about when in fact everybody knows, and Chris has already proven it and made it very clear here, that we are much more sustainable than, in my point of view, this greenwash that we have around, and that influences a lot of people. So I would like to start with that, and then the audience is free to ask questions, and continue this debate. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alfredo. It's a pleasure to be here in this conference. I'm a journalist, okay? And I don't know so much about history, but I write about history. So what I like to do is to write. I wrote that incorrect guide about the history of Brazil, and people repeat, oh, there's a common sense. But the idea would be, so I wrote about several things about the economy and history, and over the past years I started to be concerned about the environment, and we created the Árvore do Futuro, which is an approach that is an environmental approach that is more pragmatic, and I was surprised with the lack of information there is in the area. Alfredo talked about paper bags. I need to say that what irritates me most in the world are paper bags. When a company wants to become sustainable, they change the plastic bag to a paper bag. So, but just like Chris has already said here, and he also mentions on his book, a truck of plastic bags, if you need the same amount of paper bags, you need 6 trucks. So it's much heavier. It's not so can be reused as the plastic one. So where did people get this idea that paper bags are more sustainable? Where does this myth come from? Like that paper bags are more sustainable than plastic ones? Why do they think that paper that has more carbon emissions, uses more water and the rivers and all that, has this bio look, this bio approach? Why? More sustainable. Uh, Whoever wants to answer, okay? Okay. Thank you for the provocation. I think it's great to start with that, with a provocation. Uh, well, to me, there are some things. In everything in life, you have three sides of everything in life: your side, my side, and the truth. And the truth. So, with relation to anything, there will always be a reason for that to happen. Maybe it's because when thinking about paper, we think about a tree or a forest, and then we think about life instead of thinking like many people think about. When you think about the plastic, you think about smoke, about chimney. I don't know. So I think this is a little bit of what the Chris book brings, that Ron's provocation brought, And why do we create these myths and we do not bring the real data, you know? So it's nice to have a journalist debating on that and bringing some truth to light, you know? So I think it has a lot to do with this relationship. The provocation of Alfredo, that is a provocation regarding paper. I bring another provocation in the reality of Brazil, in the reality of São Paulo, in the reality of a supermarket that is a high level, that is one block away from here, where I stopped to have coffee. Have a cup of coffee, and I decided to have a yogurt together with the coffee. So, and when I went to give a destiny to that plastic glass, I said, "Do you have?" I asked the attendant, "Do you have a recycling trash bin?" And she said, "No, we don't have recyclable bins." So, what people usually do? People just throw this plastic glass in the common trash. So I brought it with me in my car. But this is the reason why we're here. We need to educate people. We need to help guide people with right information. Eu acho.
These other materials are older. We're used to metal and stone and concrete. We've had these materials for hundreds or thousands of years, even tens of thousands of years. So I think when people feel plastic, it doesn't feel natural. And they have a deep reaction. And when I see a plastic bag in my kitchen, it looks awful. My whole kitchen looks horrible with a plastic bag. It doesn't look natural. It looks kind of ugly, to be honest. And I think there's something inside us that reacts to plastic. It's not rational, it's not logical, and so we have to overcome that by showing people the evidence that although paper feels like it's coming from nature, it really isn't. It's full of chemicals, it's full of minerals, and it's much worse for the environment. So I think we have to, as Ron talked about, this is not just about facts, this is about feelings as well, and we have to make sure that people's feelings are not going in the wrong direction and making them increase harm and wasting their money. At the moment, people are spending more money to increase harm, and it doesn't make sense for anybody, apart from the people who are collecting the money. So, and another part, I think, is that the other industries, they've seen plastics grow, and I know that they're spending money, of course, to take our business. Not for environmental reasons, but for money reasons. So they're spending a lot of money to campaign against us and spread some of these bad rumors, which aren't true. And
Só falar pouco mais próximo do microfone, por favor, Chris. Close.
Closer? Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I think some of these industries are attacking us because they want to get our business, and it's nothing about the environment. They just want to make up things which are not true. And it's understandable. Plastics grew, but plastics, as we know, is less than 1%. It grew from zero, right? So of course the growth looks very big because it grew from nothing. But plastic is still under 1% and usually the greenest solution. So people are reacting on emotions. As Ron said, you have to understand the customer. But as long as we allow people to lie to the customer, they will keep demanding things which are more expensive and worse for the environment. And that's what I don't like. Because I'm a scientist, I like to act on logic and facts.
Se poder, é interessante, sabe?
It's interesting when somebody talks about reducing the use of plastic. Normally, the person is saying that someone will reduce your plastic consumption, but my plastic consumption I want to keep. I still want to use plastic bags, or I have plastic package for a biscuit, or or PET bottles. So my consumption I see as necessary. Is somebody else's consumption of someone somewhere that I see as unnecessary, So when I think about reducing the use or the production or the consumption of plastic, people are usually considering someone else's consumption, not theirs. So it's very interesting, especially what Chris said. We have this bias. I think that a lot of environmentalists have this bias of believing that what's natural is more sustainable. And this happens not only to plastic. Like, for example, a greenhouse, with a green roof. Imagine a neighborhood with 200 houses like this. It looks sustainable, but if we have a building with 200 apartments, it entails less car transportation. So we have this idea that. But if we think about the use of energy and the occupation of the land and all that, a building is much more sustainable. So I think that we have to break some bias, I think, to understand what is really more sustainable. Also, Gustavo, you talked about recycling. And it looks like it seems that this is something that is a promise that we've been listening since I was young. I'm from Curitiba, and they had a recycling program there, but it's never something that happens really. In São Paulo, for example, 60% of the people separate trash, but the recycling rate is less than 20%. So what do you have to say about that? In our understanding as a network for a circular economy, we understand that the challenge is not a challenge of one single entity, it's a collective challenge. I think this is the first important point for people to understand. For it to be a collective challenge, everybody needs to understand and believe and put some effort, for this to happen. And when we've been talking about recycling for a long time generally, and not only of plastic, of all materials, but some materials, like Chris has shown, are more valuable. And because they are more valuable, they promote recycling because, of course, there's a cost for this to be recycled. And plastic, because it is a material that has a less impact in weight in terms of effective cost and is more adaptable, it becomes more difficult. So it entails a bigger cost for this to return. So I think that we need to look at the financial side to make this happen. So we have to add value to the process or reduce the costs of the process so that it can happen in a more efficient way. This is one thing. The other thing it has to do with information. So it has to do with education. So people separate. But then who's in charge of collecting that? In a sense, it's the public power. Public power should be responsible for that. It's part of the concept of that the public power collects that. But then the public power collects but does not separate. They don't take it to an entity that can really do the triage, So we know many reasons for that not to happen. We know why we sign a law and a document that is not put into force. So because there are several moments in several conferences that we participate, and we know very clearly that this is not accomplished according to data and statistics. So looking from the perspective of who is responsible, if we do not have all the elements and all the characters participating effectively in the process, we're not going to be able to do it. I gave the example of the public power, but I could give other examples as well. For example, I could give the example of society. So I also think that the industry took time to take this step, and I think that if everybody does that, we will advance because the recycling of the material, it really exists. I have a nephew that operates a recycling plant, and he says, if I can collect and if I can separate and if I can process, I can sell. So if one of these elements is not included, then I have a problem. So collect, separate, process, So this is what you need to do.
As we showed in the data, plastic is already the greenest solution. So even with no recycling, so the public thinks we need recycling to make plastics good, but we don't. Recycling does make plastic even better, but it's already the lowest impact, so the public have been misled about this. Recycling is important, but we're not waiting for it to save plastics because it's already reducing impact, reducing waste, reducing greenhouse gas, and reducing fossil fuel usage.
Sim. Acho que aí tem outro mito também, né? Que muitas vezes talvez o processo de reciclagem gere mais dano ao meio ambiente que a matéria-prima original, né? Que é a matéria-prima virgem, né? Mas, enfim. Bom, vou abrir perguntas ao público, se alguém quiser participar. Tem uma pergunta ali?
Olá, bom dia. Eu sou o Giscard, atualmente sou reciclador, faço grades de polietileno e polipropileno de alta performance. E a pergunta vai para os três, são dois temas. Eu queria que vocês falassem um pouco sobre o Call to Action da FAO, né, da ONU, e como é que a gente pode trabalhar na conversão dos não convertidos, porque aqui tem muitos rostos
Conversion of the
conhecidos.
non-convertible.
Muita gente já conhece.
So we have a lot of people that already know and understand what.
Como é que a gente leva essa mensagem de forma eficaz aos políticos, principalmente?
Vai avisar pra ele pôr, vai. Pede pra avisar pra ele pôr. Ele tirou porque não entendo. And thank you for the question. Well, I'm going to make some comments. The first is the fact that we have Ron and Chris here debating with us is a huge advancement, I think. So I think this kind of information, this kind of data, bringing both the scientific look and a look at what's happening in the market, and having the chance to look at that and have elements to be able to discuss, I think this is a huge advancement of how we can start bringing information.
And the second step, it depends on joint actions in associations and even in multiple formats, so that we can get to the companies of goods, such as retail companies. We need to talk about this and debate about this subject. Many of them are doing that already, and others aren't. There are other initiatives. I'm going to bring examples of some companies that participate in the Plastic Circularity Network that have communication formats from there on for us to talk about. Some examples we're going to hear here, such as Tampinha Legal, which is a program that brings education and also shows how to do that in reality. We're going to hear Silmara talk about that. You have some actions such as Abiplast does with Braskem through the Plastic Transforms movement. And we do that, such as examples of the São Silvestre race, where 100% of the plastic cups used are recycled and they bring to society in different formats, such as utensils and school chairs. And there are many initiatives. And now we have to talk about it. And it's up to all of us to do that. Good morning, everyone. Orlando Marins, the Syndicate of the Industries of Plastic Materials in the northwest of Rio Grande do Sul. I want to thank Schmidt for organizing it. Contents of greatness and a lot of knowledge. We come from an area where we are very advanced in level of collection, separation, percentual of what is the country. And we are still very far from what we'd like it to be. We have completed 15, 16 years of the solid waste national program. That was good for us as people from the industry to see that what we were throwing away was worth money. So that was used, transformed, and now within our industries, pollution, we can say that it has very low indexes. Some of them are pretty much zero nowadays. In this collective that society is living through, in the right of going to a supermarket and buy a bottle, the volume that we want, this is a right that we conquered, and we can't really miss that out. There was the advent of everything that we have that is left over just once or twice, and then we give it a destination, and it's usually the wrong destination. The biggest challenge, and we are not being able to make it move forward in this country, is a municipal solid residue, solid waste program. We want to talk about the person who separates our garbage, all the crap that we produce, and this lunch place where they're gonna have a snack. And it's a clear example of that. If there is no municipal solid waste programs that force us, consumers, to separate within our homes, our condominiums, remove the obligation from our garbage man, for example, and transform that into something clean and to be continuous in recycling, reusing, with a new added value to this waste, we're not going to move forward. In Brazil, we have fantastic examples. In the beginning, people didn't wear seatbelts, and then there were fines, and even smoking now. We used to be 60-70% of the population smoking. I don't know now if it's about 10, but it's much smaller because there was a prohibition and penalties. And there is a lot of talk about waste, but not as much as there should be. And I want from you to really take us the candidate that will win the election into municipalities where we could send this and show that if me as an individual don't do my part, we won't move forward. We're gonna keep on having waste and landfills with the image of plastic that is more and more negative. And the solution there if we don't have municipal legislation, my mayor says, oh, but I can't do it because people won't follow it. We can't think like that. We have to think about a principle that we are all together. So legislation, and this will move society forward. And there are places in the world we know of where I, as a person, will do my part. If we can't advance with that, we're going to have difficulties in following and advancing. And we're going to have more and more people saying bad things about plastic. Please give us your opinion. Give me your opinion.
You mentioned events and waste. If you look at the impact of an event, it's 90% flights. And the amount that's coming from the waste is about zero, the amount of impact.
Chris, speak closer to the microphone.
Wow. So the impact of an event, about 90% is coming from the aeroplane flights. And the amount coming from the cutlery and stuff you mentioned is less than 1%. And a big part of my work is not just to show people the science, but always to remember the perspective. We talk so much about plastic that the the public and even the media is listening to us talking about plastic all day long like it's a problem, and it really isn't a problem. We're reducing waste, we're reducing impact compared to every other industry, we're less than 1% of the problem, and we're misleading the public by talking ourselves too much about plastic. We need to remind people, if they really want to make a difference. I went to Canada to talk about the plastic treaty, right? They wouldn't let me speak because they don't want to see the facts, they don't want to see the science. And the impact of my flights was 15,000 PET bottles, just for me to go and talk about a problem that doesn't exist, right? That's more than I will use in my whole lifetime. So whenever we're talking about plastics, and I do appreciate your point, we always have to remember, let's zoom out and stop thinking all the time. Let's first think, what could I do in my life that would actually make a difference? And talking about plastics it's a good thing, but it's definitely not where we can make the most impact. The most impact we can make is fly less, drive less, and eat less red meat.
Mais alguma questão? Mais alguma pergunta?
Any more questions from the audience? Ron, especially to you, as retail is the closest contact with the consumer, why isn't there more involvement, considering that retail can help decide what it puts on the shelves to have this intersection with the consumer, this connection? Great question. In reality, I talk a lot to retailers. What I see is that they are seeking to modify the conversation they have with people. They are trying to add more facts on their websites. They are wanting to give more information and provide more information to consumers. But the big problem here is making the decisions of purchase. It's an immediate thing. And don't think that we used to do with somebody there with a shopping cart, going there and putting products there and thinking about it. The thing now is so fast and so immediate. And I say that the competitor of the product nowadays isn't the other product beside it, but the cell phone. Because they are looking at the cell phone, talking to their friend, so they are purchasing, and I'm always talking about purchases. We know that the majority of purchases, and they are purchasing. And if they don't have the right information available before purchasing, it's hard to do something at the shop. And the areas of deposits of plastic. And then we are seeing the guidelines and awareness of the right use of plastics. And the product is commercializing it this way. But this has to happen way before it gets into the shop. And in the Plastic Association. And where is the person? And there was blessed and by plastic usage, and that they can get in. So maybe there is a person that has some influence in the country's life, that was operated recently, and plastic was a part of this interaction. Maybe a person, a mother, a young mother that had a baby that was blessed by plastic, usage of plastic bottles for feeding. There are lots of people that are going through events and life cycles where plastic is part of this moment in their lives. And this person can witness what happened in their lives. I was operated, and the doctor was able to do it because plastic, PVC, with blood blessed our lives. And this conversation, and we are, as business people, as manufacturers, as people, we are part of the conversation, but we need, as consumer artists, people, film stars, seal these people whose lives plastic help, and this person are participating with us and saying, oh my God, I am a much better person because of what plastic has done for me. And this person isn't participating now. We need to bring this person into a conversation.
People don't have the information they need, so this is the way to know what's greenest. It's the product, usually, the packaging that's cheapest, or it weighs the least. So you just have to weigh it. If a paper straw weighs 2 grams, and a plastic straw weighs 1 gram, and a metal straw is 10 grams, and a glass straw is 20 grams, the plastic straw has least impact because it's less material. And the greenest straw is no straw. Just say no to the straw. I'm not trying to sell you plastic, just don't take a straw. And if you do take one, take the one that is cheapest or it weighs the least. That's the general rule for a person in the supermarket who doesn't have a life cycle analysis in front of them. A paper bag weighs 60 grams and a plastic bag weighs 6 grams. That's 10 times more mass, it costs more, and it's worse for the environment. So it doesn't work every time, but it works most of the time. And the one thing I always say is you can be for the environment or against plastics, but you can't be both. You have to pick. Do you want to be for the environment or against plastic? Because if you're against plastic, you're harming the environment.
Esse comentário do Ronald me lembra.
This comment from Ronald reminded me of something about the plastic article that helped with the baleia, the whale market. They used to use the whale's fins, and sometimes they don't realize what plastic has substituted, what they've done. And to substitute in terms of innovation, and just the last question, and how can innovation help make plastic more sustainable or even seem more sustainable, change this narrative? Do you see any ways and any innovations relating to this? I see it. And in the industry, the plastic industry, has been communication, the most important thing. A little bit of what Ron said, the right way to call the right characters to do the communication. Innovation for plastic is the plastic daily life. Plastic, when it started around 100 years ago, it's not the same plastic as today. And with the consolidation and everything, it's not the same. And bringing the issue of plastic, a few years ago, we lived through something that changed the world, a pandemic a couple of years ago. In very little time, we are back here performing and having events that are safe. And I have absolutely no doubt that plastic had an essential role in that. From the moment when it protected people through the usage of disposable clothes, disposable masks, or the food that got to their homes for you to feed yourself came in a plastic packaging because it was the safest. Even the injection that you took, the vaccine that you took to protect yourself, was in a plastic packaging. So we have, as a society, many times very short term memory. And we need to change that. Innovation comes every day. Innovation was 2 years ago when we overcame such a tough moment for the global community using plastic that made us stronger nowadays. In the case of innovation, it's very important. We had a conversation yesterday with a big plastic packaging producer yesterday commenting that they are increasing recycling for the same use as the initial product. So in the case of glass, if you recycle glass, it becomes glass. It doesn't become another material that is not glass. Recycled aluminum becomes aluminum again. Paper, cardboard paper become these things. But now with resins and plastics, when recycling many times, it becomes another material. It becomes fabrics, construction materials. As plastic hasn't had a new usage that is the same as before, it has been tough for some people to capture that is really what really is recycling. It transforms, it reuses, but it's not a recycling for the same purpose. But this is an area that we are all talking about, and it's becoming reality. We are seeing bottles that become bottles. That's very important. This fact that we can have make it real to the consumer that things are going back to the same thing that was created in the first instance. Any more questions? I will introduce to you 3 issues that were asked us online.
We have some people participating online, and I would like to remind those people for them to open their cameras so that they can be seen here. One of the first questions is about Japan. What differentiates us from Japan, and how to create this culture here? How long it would take? I'm going to mix the questions a little bit because they are three very different ones. The second one is about the plastic bag and the paper bag, and the perception that people have that this perception that the paper bag and that the plastic bag is disposed inappropriately. And the second question is why some people, someone probably presented that, why they believe that biodegradation is not a sustainable solution for plastic. Can I talk about Japan? Okay, just quickly. Well, I have a very close relationship with people from the Japanese package industry. It's a fascinating country. Those who know already know that. And some years ago, I was in a recycling plant of PET bottles, and something very interesting that they do is, first, the label is already ready for you to pick up. And every Japanese knows that uh, always before you recycle a PET bottle, you need to take off the label. Okay, so they go directly to the label without the label. It's impressing. I saw the loads of PET, and I had never seen it anywhere in the world such a big amount of clean PET bottles, like in perfect condition for recycling that I saw. There were batches and batches. So, because people were made aware, were conscious that they need to take off the label. And there's a place there for you to pick up the label and throw it away. So, also the processes that they use for separation and for capturing the PET bottles in the stores is really very impressive. But it's impressive what they have been doing. But it's a system that over time they were able to implement and make feasible in the market. It was not overnight. It was a process. But now people understand and operate with this system. I just wanted to mention that about Japan because it's amazing. The second regarding the bags, the plastic bags, I'm going to make a comment about plastic bags because I think that the next question is more directed to Chris. So I think that there are 2 points regarding the plastic bags. I think that first of all, I recommend you to read Chris's book about life cycle, because one of the studies that he presents there, of all the studies that are there, talks a lot about life cycle. And then you can make a distinction between the plastic bag and the paper bag. But there's one thing that is easy to notice that is like, for example, go out on the street on a rainy day with the paper bag, okay? This is my suggestion. So just to say something against what you said, it's exactly this fact that make people understand recycling of paper because they observe, according to what they observe, they know what happens with water and paper. So it's a fact that is a problem, but it's also something that confirms to them what's happening. And I agree with you, Ron, but what about the products that were inside the paper bag? What are you going to do with them? So... And it's curious, you know that better than I do, but the inventor of the paper bag invented that because he wanted to save nature. He saw a lot of trees being brought down in Switzerland, and then he had the idea of creating a paper bag. So how I keep imagining what the perfect product would look like, It would be very, very cheap. It would be able to carry 3 times its own weight. It would be waterproof. So I mean, it's a plastic bag, right? So that is the perfect product. So, and the third question, now I can't remember. What was the third question anyway? Okay. The third question was for Chris. Chris, with regard to chemical recycling and biodegradation of the plastic. I'm sorry, this was the question. Se vocês olharem a análise do ciclo de
Is not a good idea. The ideal material lasts forever. You make it once, you spend the energy once, and it lasts forever. So encouraging degradation is not good. It costs more, the materials are less green, and it's converting solids to gas, to carbon dioxide, which is the exact opposite of what everyone wants to do. The reason that we bury our waste in a landfill is to stop it from degrading. We don't want it to degrade and give off carbon dioxide. So in a landfill, paper does not degrade, plastic doesn't degrade, nothing degrades substantially in a landfill, and we don't want it to degrade. The idea of biodegradation comes from the idea that I can throw my trash on the floor, and I don't have to worry about it because it's going to vanish by itself. And that's not correct thinking. The correct thinking is be a good human being and don't drop your stuff on the floor. So biodegradation for the most part is nonsense. And people don't realize polyethylene and polypropylene and PET all do biodegrade already. There's hundreds of studies on it. They're eaten by insects, they're eaten in the sea, they're degrading rather rapidly. There's tons of studies. There's whole journals about degradation of plastics and how quick it is. Oxidative degradation in sunlight, by insects, by fungus, by bacteria, and biodegradation.
Mais alguma pergunta? Devemos encerrar? Alfredo, por favor.
Any more questions, or can we wrap up? Good morning, everybody. Edson Martins. I'm the president of Corrente do Bem, an NGO in Araguari, Minas Gerais. And I believe that education, is when you are, it starts when you're a child. So if you eat something, you put the paper in the trash. And when I arrived yesterday, I saw there was a machine that you put litter there, and it gives you points to use in the supermarket. So why don't we invest more in the reverse logistics? It could be like an application, an app, where people would send the packet, would take the package, and that would convert into points to use in the supermarket, like a cashback or something like that. Or so these commons, these systems that you're talking about exist. They are common in Germany. There are several places where you have the system installed, but all the responsibility producer system, they involve costs in the beginning and a coupon for the consumer. The problem are the initial costs, because somebody's is going to implement the machine, right? So you deploy that, the recycler is going to receive the material and all that, but the consumer is going to arrive at the store, and now what he's paying R$1, he's going to pay 1.10. And this additional 10 cents generates some problems. So the product is going to be more expensive. And this generates an initial cost for the consumer. We know that later on it's going to pay off, but saving, but the economies are very tight, and the savings of some consumers are very problematic. So this additional cost of the purchase will need to be paid. So it's not as simple as it seems, in most economies, in most households, because these additional amounts, they add up to a bigger total cost of living. So we need to understand how they're going to be managed, how you're going to take that back, if it's going to be returned in an efficient way. In some cases, we have the systems in the United States, they are totally managed by the government, and they are not always as efficient. In Europe, in Germany, it's very easy. The store gives you the money. So you put the plastic bottle or a glass bottle there, and the money returns immediately to you, and you can spend it immediately, the money that you received in the machine, operating the system. It's important to say that when the store manages the system, it is less heavy on the budget of the family. When it's a government subject, it becomes a government subject. So, and nobody knows if the money returns or not. But what we need to understand is who's going to be in charge of this amount, of this responsibility. I understand exactly on the one hand, the frustrations of not seeing that so present. But on the other hand, like Ron mentioned, there are solutions, and the solutions do not depend only on one side. They also depend on several characters in this role, in this story. And it only works if all those involved are willing to make that happen, are genuinely willing to make that happen. I'm going to give you an example that within the network of Plus Circularity, we foster incentive and realize a project called Circula Cidade, in which we presented that to a beach city that is Guarujá, a shore city. And the network fostered exactly that we could have exactly this model, that we could help the cooperative to be more productive, and with that this process would be more interesting. And on the other hand, we could stimulate the community to deliver more material in this circular economy to go on, And we set up a configuration of two things, projects like that. At Perequê, where there's a big number of fishermen, and they stimulated the fishermen that every time that they found plastic packages, plastic materials in the sea that could come together with the fishing net, for them not to throw it back to the ocean. We asked them to bring it back to the beach, and at the beach there was a place where they exchanged that material. He weighed that material and exchanged it to, like for example, a currency, and then he could change it for a project, for a cleaning project, or for something that would be good for his family. This increased a lot the number of things, plastic things that were collected and processed. So when we talk about how the municipalities can work on that, this is an example. If in every municipality the manager had a genuine interest in doing that, because sometimes, so if they had all if they all had projects like that, we could transform much more material because it has value. If there is collection, we know that there is value. Next question. Good morning, Albano Schmidt from Dermotechnica. I'm a package manufacturer. But I wanted to make a counterpoint here to Ron. When you talk about people that were somehow impacted by plastic, my perception is that in society, this type of plastic is not a problem. Everybody accepts, uses that in an injection, in a catheter, or the problem is in the material of single use, that for more than 60 years or even more, the chemical industry, the plastic industry has been silent about. While the biodegradable, especially paper, continued saying this material is good, it's biodegradable. So, and now we are suffering the consequence for being silent for so long. So, I think that we would need to reinforce this kind of image. Get an old lady coming from the supermarket with a heavy bag and with a paper heavy bag, under the rain. Everything is going to fall on the floor, so, but not these plastic materials that are used in automobiles and aircraft and all that. So that's a counterpoint to what you said. I think this is not a problem for the population. Yeah, let me try to explain a little further. My position is that it's not only the industrial and automobiles are inside the household, but the plastic package that is facilitating the life of a part of the population, and that is very impactful in the perception of other people. For example, like none of us will be able to influence the world than other people that are already having a following on social media. For example, I don't have. I can have a lot of ideas, but I don't have 300,000 people following me. But there are people that do. And they have a baby, for example, and some of these people have a baby, and they are giving a yogurt plastic, a yogurt that is has a plastic package. So we want to make these people part of our conversation. This is what I'm talking about. Well, they asked me to wrap up because of on behalf of time. So I would like to thank a lot Chris, Ron, and the organization for inviting us and for all the questions. And if you have more questions, you can talk directly to them. Okay, they're going to be here throughout the day.